A lot of advice about creating villains goes along the lines of, make them weep, make them tormented. Villains are people too! And that's a valid point for some stories and circumstances. But here's the thing. Your villain doesn't need a sympathetic backstory or even a valid point of view to be compelling. In fact, making them purely evil might be exactly what your story needs. I'm Janet from World Anvil, a professional world-building consultant, a published author, and a game writer. And I'm going to show you why sometimes the best antagonists are the ones who choose evil. Not because they're broken, misunderstood, or misled, but simply because they wanted to. Mwahahaha. Picture this. Two villains stand before you. One was forced down a dark path by circumstance, trauma, and tragedy. The other simply looked at the world one day and decided, yes, I think I shall be magnificently evil. Is one necessarily more terrifying than the other? Or more interesting? Well, that really depends on your execution. A villain who chooses to be bad is saying that, given perfect free will, they'd still pick darkness and destruction. And that can be far more unsettling than someone who was pushed into villainy by external forces. Think of all the movies and TV shows that feature a villain who seems, frankly, sociopathic. By definition, by the way, a sociopath is someone with no regard for right and wrong, who ignores the rights and feelings of others. So when you think about it in those terms, the list of such villains includes some of the most iconic bad guys in film and literature. And while these characters might have superficial reasons to do the things they do, let's face it, the murder and mayhem that they unleash is a vast overreaction to the circumstances they find themselves in. I'm sure I've missed some from this list, by the way, so add your favourites in the comments. Whether it's Hannibal Lecter or the evil queen from Snow White, these villains could have simply enjoyed the privileged life they already had, or turned the other cheek. The fact that they chose to be monstrous instead makes them strangely fascinating, in a totally different way to a villain whose tragic circumstances push them over the edge into evil. And let's be honest, mustache-twirling evil can be really fun to write. And it's even more fun when your villain knows exactly who they are and revels in it. Think of Disney's Maleficent in the original Sleeping Beauty. She cursed a freaking baby because she wasn't invited to a party, and she was absolutely delighted about it. She calls herself the mistress of all evil and transforms into a dragon just because she can. And if that's not self-knowledge, I don't even know what is. The key is conviction. If you choose to write a simple villain, they should revel in their nature, embrace their choices, and pursue their goals with unwavering determination. They're not apologizing for being bad, they're celebrating it. Often, particularly in musicals and Disney, with an amazing song and dance number outlining their horrible plans. Looking at you, Scar from The Lion King, and Ursula from The Little Mermaid. If you're worried that a morally straightforward villain is boring, consider this. A villain can be simple in their morality, yet complex, intelligent, and subtle in their methods, relationships, and personality. Maybe your Dark Lord has a wicked sense of irony, or a sophisticated plan that's a joy to watch as it unfolds. Here's a list of character traits that can add an unexpected dimension to your Dark Lords, without making them morally ambiguous. Flawless manners and social graces go a long way. Perhaps they're painfully polite, even when planning world domination. Maybe that's why villains are always portrayed as British. Or what about a strong personal code? They always keep their word, not because it's the right thing to do, but because breaking promises is just tacky. They aim for perfection in their evil deeds because a sloppy job is just embarrassing. They might be really loyal to their minions and crew, even if it's only because they see them as possessions or a duty. Or perhaps they truly love those who support them in their evil antics. Aesthetic appreciation is actually a common one for villains. Beautiful music or art can make them cry, but human suffering doesn't faze them. This is a really common trope. For example, all evil people seem to love classical music. Or how about simple, intellectual curiosity? They're genuinely fascinated by how things work and love learning, even if they use that knowledge for evil. A great sense of humour is another good villain trait. They can laugh heartily, especially at the cosmic joke of existence, or at deep irony. Or perhaps they find their own villainy endlessly amusing, rather than angsty. Use World Anvil's character template to map out these crucial character-defining traits. You can also show your villain's relationships to others, from minions to nemesis. Nemesis. It's a great way to show how and why their followers decide to stick with them, how they respect a worthy foe, and what they think of the other people in your story. By colouring in your villain's personality traits, relationships, and behaviour patterns, you can build out these layers of complexity without muddying their moral stance. Evil doesn't necessarily mean one-dimensional, and just because they're simple, they don't have to be cartoonish, dumb, or just your average villain. Some of the villains I've quoted here have been from classic good versus evil stories, and putting an end to a simply evil villain is a great climax for those kinds of tales. But another great use for the simply evil villain is as a foil for morally grey characters. When your heroes are already morally grey, like thieves or anti-heroes, a contrast between them and the bad guy can help your audience root for them. Like, okay, they're thieves, but at least they're not as bad as that super evil guy over there. They are, in many ways, the lesser of two evils. This is done to great effect in Ocean's 11 and the other Ocean's movies, where the good guys are criminals plotting a heist, but the bad guy is someone who really deserves it. The Dungeons & Dragons movie Honor Among Thieves also employs this contrast beautifully. It gives us a sense of moral superiority for our heroes and helps us root for them. Another helpful side effect of simply evil villains in these stories is that it saves you time. The simply evil villain is quick to explain, and that's good, because what's important in these stories is usually the complications and mechanics of the heist, or the interpersonal struggles between your heroes. That takes screen time priority, or word count if you're writing for the page. But do you want to know the most interesting reason why simply evil villains can work? It's because they can force your heroes to confront the road not taken, and weigh the cost of their moral code. Sometimes in literal dollars and cents. A great example is the holiday film It's a Wonderful Life. The villain, Mr. Potter, is irredeemably evil and never suffers a single consequence for his bad behaviour. Meanwhile, our hero George Bailey keeps choosing the good of his community over personal success and ambition. Two disastrous consequences. Another classic example is Prince Humperdinck from The Princess Bride. At one point, the boy asks his grandfather, "Who kills Prince Humperdinck?" When he learns that the evil prince, who, by the way, planned to murder his innocent bride on their wedding night to start a war, gets off scot-free, the kid understandably yells,
"You mean he wins? Jesus, Grandpa, what did you read me this thing for?"
The movie does an excellent job of subverting the expectation that such a purely evil character will surely pay for his crimes. He doesn't, because in the words of the grandfather, well, who says life is fair? That, by the way, is the theme of the original novel. Not true love conquers all, but life isn't fair. It's just fairer than death. Kind of a downer, really, when you think about it. So when a villain chooses evil and benefits from it, even just in the short term, it raises the question, why should your heroes bother following a righteous path? And this creates conflict that goes beyond physical confrontation. It becomes a clash of worldviews, where your hero must prove, through action, why their path is the better way. If the moral lesson isn't simply, evil sows the seeds of its own destruction, then you have to dig a little deeper for your theme, or the point of your story. And digging deeper leads to better, more layered, and more interesting writing. Of course, you'll also need to create heroes worthy of these unrepentant villains. So check out my video on the 5 hero archetypes to learn how to craft protagonists who can stand up to pure villainous evil. Now grab your hammer and go world build! Mwahahaha!